Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Cris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to First Things First. I'm Ebony K. Williams. That's Hall of Famer Cris Carter. Gottlieb, good to see you, man.
Welcome.
Well, the only reason I'm here.
Welcome back.
The only reason I'm here is because Nick was, breathing into that paper bag, couldn't control himself last night.
Hey, listen.
You just out the gate.
Listen,
out
you gotta leave my partner alone because he had second and third life after the trade deadline.
Exactly. The redemption. All right, well, listen, we're going to start, speaking of the Cavs, with another strong performance from LBJ. Now, the new-look Cavs, LeBron finished with 37 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists. His 4 new teammates combined for 48 points as Cleveland beat the Thunder 120-112. That's the Cavs' 4th straight win. Here's LeBron after the game.
Just trying to play to our strengths, and our coaching staff is giving us a great game plan every night since the last few games, and just trying to execute it. We got a long ways to go. We want to continue to get better, but it's a good start for us. Kobe did a heck of a job of understanding what our team needed. It just wasn't working out for us, and he felt like, obviously you guys saw his quotes, and he made the changes that he felt that best fits our team. And then it's on me to make sure the new guys that come in, that I make sure that they fit in and make it as seamless as possible. And, that's my job. This is the 3rd game in a row my voice is gone. So I'm just trying to have the communication at all-time high for us, for the new guys, and for the rest of the guys here as well.
Okay, Cris Carter, on Monday, after the first game of these new-look Cavs, we talked about evidence, right? We've now seen more evidence. Is this the real deal?
Well, this is what they are, Ebony. They're far more athletic. They're far more defensive, the capability of them playing at a high level defensively. Now, how good will they be? In spurts, they can be very, very good. There's an upgrade. You look at the backup point guard position. If you look at their interior defender, but by getting Nance there, all these things, they've had good shooters. So also they got young. You got guys right now that they're a little more, Doug, I know you'll appreciate this, they're a little more antsy to hear someone's voice compared to, I got that. And, just their overall legs and their ability to be able to run and get up and down the court. The old NBA, just in the last couple of years, was get older, spot up shooters, and that's how LeBron could be successful. It's not that way anymore. Golden State is stacked. Houston's got a very good team. And the only way they're going to be able to do was they got younger. Kobe did do a great job in a pressure-packed situation by getting them the assets they did. And I believe all of them are very important. We might talk about George Hill more because he's a starter, but I believe Clarkson, Nance's ability to play versatile positions, they switch out 1 to 5, especially when you start playing against the West, and their ability to put the ball in the bucket. I believe that right there is going to give LeBron the type of energy, I know that you're interested in talking about that, to be able to get to the home stretch and be able to get to the playoffs.
Look, the NBA season, the cliche is it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? But when you add in 4 players from non-competitive teams to a team that's competing for a championship, it's like if you're running a marathon and you're at like mile 15, and all of a sudden there's guys that just hopped in the race like, this is easy, this is awesome,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So let me know once we get to the 26-mile marker how you're feeling. As of now, it's a home run. They look great. Everybody's happy. LeBron's integrating his new teammates. They look younger. They look more athletic. But remember, it's 2 games together. They look great against a very solid, although not maybe elite, Western Conference team. I think Oklahoma City's solid.
Right.
They're somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th best team in the West. But still,
outside of that win against Golden State last week, they have struggled still as far as chemistry and playing as an elite team.
Right, and the weakness to the Thunder is their bench, and now the strength to what Cleveland has built is a strength in numbers. They have a very good bench. You could even point out they might have a better bench than the Golden State Warriors, because the Warriors, you're depending on Livingston and Iguodala, who are closer to being washed than they are kind of their former star self. That said, look, Talk to me when there's 30 games together. Talk to me when Kevin Love returns, because that makes them a lot less athletic defensively, although probably a better shooting lineup offensively. There are still some issues with pace if and when they play against the Golden State Warriors. But as of now, like, look, this is like the third day of school. You love your teacher, you love your new friends, you love your new trapper keeper, but eventually it's still school. It's still a long regular season. There'll be downs, whereas right now they're up.
Okay. Yeah, and it's also, what will they do when they face adversity? And, I mean, what they don't have in this trade is a lot of playoff experience outside of George Hill. So what if they get, which LeBron and them have, what if they get down 2-1? You know, in a series, in the Eastern semifinals or finals, how do they respond there? And can they stay injury-free until they get to the playoffs, because they only have a third of the season left?
Well, the other part is that when LeBron has been championship-level successful, he's had somebody else who could take the ball and get a bucket in the fourth quarter. You know, Dwayne Wade in Miami, and, of course, Kyrie Irving in Cleveland. This roster probably still doesn't have that. Maybe it's Jordan Clarkson, but everybody thinks, oh, if you put Clarkson in, that means you sit Hill, right? That takes away the playoff experience. And if you play them both together, now all of a sudden you're going to have to sit one of those athletic bigs down. What do you do with Jeff Green? What do you do with Cedi Osman, who's provided them a ton of energy defensively and on the board? So, look, they appear to be better. It was a disaster that's going a lot better. Everybody feels good about this. This is a healthy divorce for Isaiah Thomas and for everybody, but it's just the second game.
I hear you. So not enough evidence yet for you, Gottlieb, to be all in on these new Cavs.
No, now they're the favorite in the East, like they should have been, but they're not the overwhelming favorite like some would allow you to believe based on the last two games.
Right, and we can't just forget how good Golden State and Houston have been. You got to put Houston right there with them. They have the same basically record, one less win in the win column than Golden State. So we know it's going to.
But you put Houston in the same conversation as Golden State.
Well, this is the thing. As far as this show, I put them in the same conversation. As far as because we're talking about who they might face potentially in the finals.
Yeah.
But as far as NBA history and lore, no, they haven't proved it. Chris Paul's lack of success in the playoff. James Harden, we saw what he did last year. Sure. Yeah, Capella.
Mike D'Antoni's system has never boded
right.
well
When
in
you
the
start slowing the ball down, in the playoffs, and the possessions become more and more important, how are they able to do that? But as far as this year is concerned, because, man, what if Golden State gets a bad matchup in the semifinals? Because the depth of the West. And what is San Antonio going to be? Is Kawhi going to come back? We know OKC, the Roberson injury is significant for them. So as far as the breadth of this conversation, yes, I include them together because we don't know who's going to be the number one seed, and we don't know who's going to be in the finals. But if you look at last year's finals, where did Cleveland struggle the most? That was when LeBron went to the bench. And last night's example, all the starters for Cleveland were a minus in the plus-minus category.
Right.
Now, the bench, all of them were a plus.
Right.
Now, if you look at +8 for Hood, +16 for Clarkson, +14 for Nance, +14 for Jeff Green, that's where they got better. So it's not as if I got to be balled in, but this is a lot better team than if they face Golden State again, I'm sure they like their chances better with this team, even though they don't have that second scorer in Kyrie Irving.
Now, those numbers you point out about those pluses coming off the bench, that's exactly what I want to get to. Kevin Love will be back at some point, okay? What do you think? Doug brought it up. Chris Carter, I want to know your take on what Kevin Love's return to these new-look Cavs will do to their chemistry, because some people say if it's not broke, you don't fix it, but obviously he's going to get playing time when he comes back.
Yeah, I believe Kevin Love is best fit with the Cavs, and for the long-term success, him playing the 5. Him playing the 5, LeBron playing the 4. LeBron's playing a lot of the 4 now. If you look at last night, how would they be? They would be hurt on the glass. Tristan Thompson got dominated last night by Adams. So there is some deficiencies there defensively, but it also spreads the court. LeBron gets to the hole more now with all these shooters. So offensively, they're more deadly, which Doug mentioned. But those are things that I'd like to look at. And I believe that Kevin Love, I just like having talented players.
Okay.
So when you add another talented player, how long will it take them to adjust to the new players?
Well, I want to ask you, Doug, specifically, do you think it's worth, because y'all are both saying the trade-off is maybe less power on defense but more offensive power. Is it worth the trade-off?
Well, it doesn't really matter because he's going to play, right?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You make max money and you average 25 a game and you get hurt, you're coming back, you're going to play. Sure. So the question is, who's going to sit? Now, and you're correct. He's a very good spot-up shooter. He's a very good rebounder. He can score a little bit in the post, but he limits what you can do defensively. And now the only rim protection you have is LeBron James, which can be exhausting as opposed to when you play with Tristan. You can play LeBron some at the 3, but now that means you're sitting one of the guards, you know? It changes you, and I'm not sure it changes you for the better, but it's a change that is going to happen. Like, you think, well, he's going to come back and Kevin Love's going to come off the bench. Like, it's not even close to the way
There's no scenario that happens.
Right. I just believe the person they talked the least about in the trade is Larry Nance Jr.
Right.
I believe his ability to hustle. He's playing a lot like Tristan did a couple.
When they won the championship.
Yes. So he could be the 5, Love could be the 4, and LeBron could play the 3.
Finally, let's talk more about LeBron. Now, this little run's been nice for the Cavs, right? But the big story is still whether or not he stays. There's this free agency thing still at play. Now, and the odds of where he'll end up, well, anybody could guess. The Rockets are the betting favorite to land LeBron, followed by then the Cavs, then the Lakers and Warriors. Cris, where do you think this guy's going to end up?
This is what I do know for certain. LeBron today, he doesn't know. So it really puts us in a dilemma as far as trying to pick where he's going to go. I do know something else. The team that's the number 1 as far as odds, there's a reason why they're number 1. They want LeBron James. They would have traded almost anything to be able to get LeBron James before the trade deadline last week. So LeBron has to make up his mind after this season. I do believe this trade was pivotal, that the percentages of him staying in Cleveland went up because of the overall youth. And he might not like Dan Gilbert, but him being committed to the youth movement and to the extended salaries for next year, increased luxury tax. So in doing that, it's a greater buy-in for Dan Gilbert. So I believe the probability, because he's in Cleveland now, if they win a championship, Nick talks about that all the time. If they win a championship, he believes that he stays because we haven't seen a great player leave after winning a championship. But right now, LeBron doesn't know.
You know who's going to know first? He's going to know first. So we used to work at this other place.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll not mention the place we used to work together.
We try not to.
But I was walking with Scott Van Pelt. We're walking across campus, and CC comes running up. He's like, "Yo, you know where he's going?" We're like, "Who?" We're like, "LeBron." He's like, "He's going to Miami." This is a week before the rest of the world knew. CC knew. So when it happens, you will know.
Chris Carter knew. He got the crystal ball.
There's some deep throat that texts him, that calls him, that he will know.
It might be a little Ohio connection.
He is not going to.
That makes sense.
Listen to me. He's not going to Houston. Okay.
You sound very confident about that, Doug.
I am. Not just because they'd have to shed all of the rest of the pieces in order to bring him in. Not just because he just got done playing with one of his best friends who was over the hill, and that didn't work out so well, right? He'd be playing with Chris Paul, who does get hurt a lot, is one of his closest friends, but there has to be that fear of, man, I can't play with these old dudes again.
Yes.
Especially now after being reinvigorated by playing with these young guys. But more than anything, James Harden is the face of Adidas basketball. LeBron James is the face of Nike basketball. Those are real rivalries.
Now, I have never heard that.
That's a business angle. I like it.
And Adidas is making a run at Nike. They've already overtaken Jordan Brand as the number 2. I don't know anybody buy Adidas ahead of Jordans, but apparently people do. Okay, and so the idea that he would elevate Adidas and elevate the brand of James Harden, you guys, he is not just a businessman, he's a businessman. And he understands.
The words of Jay-Z here
He understands
morning.
the idea of being a billionaire because of Nike is not helped if James Harden becomes a champion.
All right, we'll move on.
I like that.
Now to Golden State.
I'm going to have to steal that.
Steve Kerr, I know, right?
On the show.
Decided to let some of his players do the coaching after Monday night's game.
You think he'll talk about LeBron again?
Man, he a business.
Golden State, y'all are such a trip. Golden State then proceeded to blow out the Suns by over 40 points. Now, some people are calling the move by the coach disrespectful. Kerr responded to that yesterday. Listen.
I've been quickly reminded today of what an insane world we live in and how everything now is just a story and constantly judged and picked apart. And it's the world we live in, so everyone's going to debate it. And whether it's a controversy or not, it has to become one, I guess. We have a veteran team. You turn over the timeout huddles to the players so that they can discuss strategy on their own. I don't think it's earth-shattering news.
Okay, Doug, is Steve Kerr right here? Is this just insanity? Are people just taking this way too seriously?
EHE. Everybody hates everything. Okay, just remember that, right? You're like, man, that was great. You look on Twitter, somebody can find fault with it.
Yes.
He's won 250 games faster than any coach in NBA history. He's a former player, so he's done it. He's a champion, so he's done it as a coach and as a player.
Yes.
Okay, and he played under the two greatest NBA coaches of the modern era, Greg Popovich and Phil Jackson. And of course, he uses some of their philosophical beliefs. If he wants to sit there in Speedos and coach with Vans on as a psychological move to help motivate his team midseason, God bless him. Who are any of us, let alone pundits, to criticize Steve Kerr? And oh yeah, by the way, it's always been a players' league. It's always been a progressive league. This has happened elsewhere. This is just what happens when we're bored in the middle of the season, and Steve Kerr does something that maybe some people haven't seen before.
Right. Don't they say that this happens in Cleveland all the time with LeBron?
Yes.
Like he's running everything anyway. So I'm with you, because their pursuit of what they're going after, 3 championships in 4 years, you have to do some things that are a little unconventional. Now, you mentioned the Popovich influence on him, the Phil Jackson. He has done a great job of blending those things into what Steve's personality is, because Steve is not Pop, and he's definitely not Phil Jackson, but he's made his mark in coaching by being himself. And we can't think that we know what it's to be like to coach the Golden State Warriors. Oh, it's easy. They got 4 all-stars. Like, anybody can do it. No, anybody couldn't do it. Steve Kerr, we know this. He is a great coach when he has great talent. There's no need for us to evaluate him any other way. So the organization, they do things a little bit different. How they travel, what they eat, the influence they give the players on a daily basis. So to me, to see him saying that, my team has been in a rut. Yeah, people say, well, they won 2 or 3 games in a row, but they were in a rut the last 30 days. Look at the technical fouls, Durant. Yeah, look at Draymond getting ready to get suspended.
Combined 24 technical fouls between those two, right?
Yeah, so he's his goals are long-term. So the psyche of this team, it becomes very, very important, and it's hard to keep older guys engaged.
Sure.
We saw them struggle with that in Cleveland. Steve Kerr is trying to get to that before the dog days of January basketball, which they went through the rest of the NBA. So I like Steve Kerr. I like what he's doing, and to do something great, sometimes you have to do some things a little unconventional.
And I think some of it is also that it was against Phoenix. But look, Phoenix has been non-competitive in so many games.
Yeah, whose fault is that? That's not Steve's fault.
It's not, but I actually honestly think he probably would have done it regardless of the opponent. I do think his goals are so much greater. And, like the Lakers, they have an expression that other teams use where they have a get what you want day, right? You come into practice, and if you want to lift. You want to shoot. If you want to go home, go home. We don't want you here. Get what you want. It is a players' league. It is a long, arduous season, and they have been a little bit grumpy. They have been playing their best basketball. And if Steve Kerr says, "I want to turn it over to the players," then let's see how it works out. It's honestly great leadership,
well,
right?
Well, frankly, I don't even see why this is remotely controversial. I think that the first interest of any coach should be the best interest of your team.
Well, no,
period, point blank, end of story.
I just think it's because it was against Phoenix, and the thought is that he wouldn't have done it against a legitimate NBA team.
I think that's a huge presumption. I think people are going very far with that, because I tend to agree with you, Doug. I don't think he would have really cared who the opponent was if he felt that was in the best interest of Golden State that particular night.
I think Golden State, where they are right now, people love to hate them. And especially once Durant came over from OKC, they have a reason to hate them. So now they see this. There's nothing going on in the NBA. Steve Kerr does this. All these guys are embarrassed. They should be embarrassed picking up their checks. The same thing I told you yesterday, because they could have done something about this. This is one of 4 40-point losses by Phoenix this year.
Because I think that's a good point, actually, that I think there is a target on the back of Golden State. And I think if they were struggling this season and a coach felt like this was an innovative way to turn the ship around, I don't think it would be met with criticism at all.
Well, they haven't necessarily been, they were blown out by Oklahoma City. They have had some, had some up and down performances.
But they're still the overwhelming favorite right now to win the title.
I think the part that they're struggling with, and that they're not naming names, is Iguodala and Livingston. Right now, are they over the hill, or are they just disengaged? And is this a way to re-engage them, right?
Okay.
Is this the unifying force? They're not pulling in other directions. I think it's brilliant strategy. I think there are people, there are champions in business who turn it over to the employees, and that's the sign of good leadership. And I'll be interested to see how Golden State kind of reacts now that not only did he turn it over to the players, but they actually played great basketball.
Okay, finally, Houston Rockets beat the Timberwolves last night, 126-108. James Harden led the way with 34 points and 13 assists. Now, don't look now, but the Rockets, well, they're just half a game back from the Warriors in the West. Chris Carter, how real of a threat is Houston to Golden State?
I think they're a real threat. I think that, and this is what I've seen. Last week we went to Brooklyn, Nick and myself, to watch them. And how they close out games, I think, is very interesting. We saw in the past with James Harden last year a lot of isolation. So with Chris Paul, with both of them being ball dominant, what would they do? You see, they're not running as much isolation. They do a lot of pick and roll, and they do some ball movement to close out games. So I think that they've gotten better at that. I believe that Chris Paul would be up to the challenge in the playoffs to kind of be able to get this off of his resume as far as flops in the playoffs and or being injured. Yep. The battles that he'll have with the point guards that are in the West, are dynamic. So those are the things that I see, the overall mental change in the psyche of Houston. They brought in some tough players. Sure. B.J. Tucker, Chris Paul, and a number of other guys to bring some grit to that team. Was basically a three-point shooting team. So I'm interested to see how this plays out in the playoffs, and does their success in the regular season transfer over to playoff basketball.
I do feel like there's a little of Shooter McGavin with the Rockets, right? Like, we're all talking about the Cavs, and we talk about everything else, and they're sitting there going, we're too busy winning, right? We're sitting here winning. That's what it's supposed to be about. But I still struggle to buy into the idea this is a championship caliber roster, because in basketball, you are what your best player is. And James Harden still is not really invested at the defensive end. James Harden still overhandles the basketball. Yes, Chris Paul is going to help take some of that pressure off him, and it has worked out better when healthy than I think anybody could have thought. But when you have Chris Paul, who I would agree with you, the narrative is wrong. It should be more about being injured in the playoffs than being inept in the playoffs. That Clipper team was never healthy, so we never really know how good they could have been. But Chris Paul hasn't won the postseason. He hasn't won the postseason. D'Antoni hasn't won the postseason. And the style of shooting 30 or 40 threes in big playoff games hasn't won in the postseason. The reason the Warriors have won these championships is their defensive numbers, that they shut you down, that they shut off your water at some point in the game. And that's not how this Houston team is constructed better, but it still has the inherent flaw of their best player not being bought in at the defensive end, as opposed to the Warriors, who have gotten more buy-in from Kevin Durant defensively than at any other point in time.
Now, one thing I do think is very important, Doug, I'll get your opinion on this, is I believe it's important that Houston has home court advantage. I don't believe it's important that Cleveland in the East, and I don't believe it's that important for Golden State. But I do believe that Houston, them having that in their back pocket where they would be able to, if it got to 7 games, that being in the Western Conference semifinals or in the finals, that game would be played in Houston. I believe it would help out to be able to exercise some of those demons that D'Antoni has, that Paul has, and James Harden.
Yeah, but didn't they lose Game 6 last year? I think was at home. So they have lost at home in big play. And that was when it looked like James Harden just kind of shut it down out of frustration, right? Did the Kobe Bryant, where you're going to have to get me some better players. It'd be fascinating to see who goes for it.
I think if they get to the end of the regular season, they have the best record as a sense of accomplishment, knowing that they will be judged on the postseason. I think having that in their back pocket, I believe, can help some teams, and I believe Houston's one of those teams.
Yeah, look, if I'm them, I just want to avoid. It's more important who I'd match up for before Golden State, right? Like we just kind of took down Oklahoma City, but I don't think they want to play Oklahoma City. I think that could be a tough matchup. That could be a 6 or 7. Like, one of the magic to why the Warriors were so fresh and so rested and could dominate the Cavs, it only took them 12 games to get through the playoffs last year.
Very
right?
efficient.
Like, and I actually think, like, the new composition of the Cavaliers is better for a longer playoff run because they have better depth. It may not be better in a Game 7 when it's about your stars, but games 1 through 6, they do have some bench. I think Houston is pretty well equipped for a longer. They have a little bit better bench than the Golden State Warriors do. I'm a little suspicious of this bench, although Golden State could add somebody in the buyout market. But to me, it's more important. This is just me, not home court advantage, but can you avoid the Spurs? right? If I'm Houston, I want nothing to do with the Spurs. If they have Kawhi Leonard back, I do not want them. And if I can avoid the Spurs and the Thunder, even better.
Really quick question. Joe Johnson, does he help Houston and why?
I don't understand. Like, Joe Johnson's been ISO Joe, right? Like, look, Joe Johnson's going to get buckets. He's like, you know, Vince Carter can still dunk at 41. We just showed the highlights. Joe Johnson at 41 could still get 20 a night. But the ball stops, and it goes completely
counterproductive.
Well, Mike D'Antoni's like, I want ball movers, not ball stoppers. Right. So you get Chris Paul is like, all right, I'm going to move it more, but the ball still slows a little bit. Now you're going to get Joe Johnson, like that thing. That's your team is built for one style, and now you're getting parts that fit another style. So, like in a video game, does it work? Hell yeah. Okay? But life ain't playing a video game. It's playing real life with guys with egos, and they get the ball, and they've played one way for 15 years, and now you're telling them to play another? I think it actually might be subtraction by a little bit of addition.
Yeah, I think my partner Nick Wright's going to enjoy that. He kind of likes Houston,
Can't wait to hear about that. So we're going to get back to the Cavs here. Now, they've been on a roll recently, right? And it's not just the new guys. Looks like new LeBron, who it is. He's averaging 30 points, 13 assists, and 9.5 boards during Cleveland's 4-game win streak. Doug, is LeBron in the conversation? Is he making an aggressive push for MVP?
I mean, look, he's looked great. I mean, he's played great since he's gotten this new cast of characters. And even remember the last game before the trade, he was incredible. He hits the game-winning fadeaway against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, yeah, here's the one problem. They were bad when they had LeBron. They changed players, and now they're good when they have LeBron. If it's truly most valuable, well, then the value is in the supporting assets, not in LeBron James. But the MVP has never truly been about who's the most valuable. It's about who's had the best season. And he was having a remarkable season for about 2 months, and then he went through this swoon, and now he's having a remarkable couple of games. So is he in the conversation? Yeah. I mean, James Harden's been more valuable and probably better throughout the entire season and probably should have won it 1 or 2 times previously. But I would say LeBron is absolutely in the conversation, and he's played like the best player in the game the past 2 games.
Quick follow-up, though, Doug. When you talk about most valuable, somebody that was sitting in this chair the past 2 days said that it is LeBron who's essentially primarily made those 4 guys around him so successful. So would that be built into the calculus of his value?
Yeah, but if that was the case, then why didn't he make the previous cast?
Well, that's what Chris Carter was saying.
Last 18 games before that, they were 6 and 12. So we can't always build a house on what Nick is putting as the foundation. All right, but what I think is LeBron had played so spectacular. But with Houston being a half game from Golden State, most valuable, what he's meant to that franchise this year, bringing over Chris Paul, and people, you know, and you got the question, can they play together? Yeah. 2 ball-dominant guys, they've worked it out. And when Paul, Capella, and Harden are in the lineup, I mean, that combination is like something that we haven't seen in recent dates. So I think that Harden has a little bit of an edge, but I think that what could swing it back to LeBron is that in this 30 games with these 4 new teammates, if they play spectacular, if they maybe potentially end up with the number 2 seed, and Houston's the number 2 seed in the West, then you have to build a way, man, wow, how much of an impact with LeBron these last third of the season, and that could tilt it in LeBron's favor. Now, LeBron has something negative like Michael Jordan. He could have been MVP a lot of those years. Yeah. Sure. But they owe Harden one. So is this the year that they pay Harden back for the 2 previous great seasons that he did have?
Probably if they finish with the best record in the NBA, right?
How do y'all feel about that, though? Just, you know, as pro athletes at some point, both of you, how do you feel about those kind of retroactive accolades for something you did in the past?
It's the reality of it, right? It's the reality of, all right, we owe him, like Karl Malone got one year. We're like, we got to recognize Karl Malone, right? And is
that fair, though, for the person that's actually the best that year?
I mean, Aaron Rodgers should have won it going back to last season, right? Because they didn't win, they didn't lose a game coming down the stretch to end up carrying a team in the playoffs. But Matt Ryan had the better season, so we gave him the MVP award.
Right. This is the problem, because when you're great, the expectations you have just on a normal season, for you, it's like, wow, how good was LeBron? Well, that's his normal. 27, 8, and 8. That's what he does. So now these players you have to play greater than a great player, and then they might make you, it's like your job. You know, they don't pay you the first week, make you do a week in the hole. You know, and then they pay you the next week.
Sure.
So I think that it works out in the long run.
Okay.
It stops from also somebody having a spectacular one season and them getting the MVP.
Okay.
You know, so I like how it works out.
Okay, let me bring up a name we've not brought into this conversation yet, and that is Steph Curry. He's on the team that everybody's still saying is the overwhelming favorite to win the title. Where does he fit into the MVP discussion?
I don't think you even put him ahead. He's had a run here where you're like, oh yeah, when Steph is right, he's unbelievable. But I still think I would put Durant ahead because what Durant contributes offensively is similar and yet maybe even less guardable. And then he's contributing more at the defensive end than he has at any other point in time. And look, they're going to split votes. It's just that's the problem of it.
But that's part of the signing off. If you're going to play together, like you're going to be, you not necessarily cancel each other out. But you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between how they're playing.
It's interesting though. That to me is one of the things that I think fans sometimes lose sight of. Like there are people that forever hold it against Kevin Durant for going and signing up with the Warriors. But to me, that shows a sacrifice of ego. Because that's saying like, yeah, I'll probably never win an MVP award again. Okay.
And it's made him a better defensive player.
Right. So I'll be a finals MVP, which is better. Or maybe even not a finals MVP, but I'll win championships. And, like, look, the MVP conversation is cool, but, you know, Kobe won 1. Michael could have won 10 of them. It didn't really matter. We really, truly judge people's greatness, especially in basketball, based upon the number of championships they won.
Absolutely.
It's harder in football because there's so many other moving parts, so many other players. But yet in basketball, it's how many of the big rings did you actually win? And the MVP is an interesting discussion. I think that we take it too literally, value. LeBron has the most value. Durant has more value. James Harden's brought a ton of value to Houston, but he's had 3 great seasons, and this one has allowed his team to compete for the best record in the NBA. He'll probably win it, even though LeBron last 2 games has looked like the best player in the league.
Right. The numbers always tell a story, and LeBron having 32 double-doubles and 10 triple-doubles. Now, he might end the season with 15 to 20 triple-doubles. He have 20 triple-doubles. Yeah. LeBron's going to edge him out.
But he also had 7 weeks where he had the lowest plus-minus in the league. And
you think people will remember that though when it comes to when it comes time to make that MVP decision? Are they going to go back in the archives, so to speak?
That's what becomes important for people like us to bring it up.
Because we're saying like, look, if LeBron is so great and so valuable, why do they have to change everything else around him?
Because I'm going to have a few debates with a guy sitting over there.
If LeBron is so good, why were they? What was the record? 6-14 of the last
20? Out of 18, 6-12.
6 and 12.
Go ahead and get that paperwork going, Doug.
Okay, good.
Now, moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys had a disappointing season last year, finishing 9-7 and missing the playoffs entirely. Now, there were a lot of different reasons. Dak Prescott, well, he took a couple steps backwards. Zeke Elliott missed 6 games due to suspension. And, well, Dez, he just got another year older. However, Cowboys legend Charles Haley, well, he saw it a little bit differently. Take a listen.
I blame everybody. It's one team. Right, and everybody's together, and that's the key, man. I go over there and I tell guys, I said, man, Jerry built this house for a bunch of damn losers, and they get mad. Yeah, they get mad, and I say,
that's what it's been so far. 22 years since the Super Bowl.
You know what? They have to do something about it. I can't do anything about it. I can't play. I said, all I can do is give you some knowledge. And then, you know what, that ego's so big and they so busy getting on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. Hey, maybe they should get in that playbook. Maybe they should learn how to rush, catch, and block.
Whew, harsh words there. Chris Carter, what do you think the Cowboys can do to get back in playoff contention?
Okay, first of all, Charles Haley. Slow down just a little bit.
Strong, right?
Yeah, slow down. Slow down with the old man, all these young kids.
It was a get off my lawn there, right?
Yeah.
They're on the Twitter, and they're on the social media.
Yeah, and so are the other teams that are winning except New England. Sure. So get used to that. Now, as far as Jerry is concerned, Charles, he brings up some interesting points, but this is what they need to do. A lot like Charles Haley did. The reason why he's got all those rings, in San Francisco and when he was with Dallas, they had such respect around the league that they typically in the offseason picked up a veteran or two that would help them get over whatever hump it was. If they were trying to get through Green Bay, whichever team, or if they were trying to get through Dallas or San Francisco. They had players like Charles Haley who brought some veteran leadership. Now, I don't agree with him. I don't believe that this team is full of a bunch of losers because they're prominent players. They all come from big schools. Like Ezekiel Elliott, he's not used to losing. Now, Dak, you could say he was a winner at Mississippi State. He's won since he's been in the league. Now, last year, they had a little setback, but you look at all the chaos surrounding the team. Like, did we expect them to thrive? You know, after the 13-3 season, I thought they would have a correction coming back to the pack. I thought they would be 10-6. And their biggest problem is they don't have explosive players. They don't play a versatile enough game offensively that they can compete at a high level. They're just a power football team. They got the 5 offensive linemen. They're going to knock you back. They got no speed at the tight end position with Jason Witten. God bless his soul. He's a Hall of Famer. But Witt can't run no more. Now, can he make a contribution to a playoff team? Yes. Horizontally. They don't do anything horizontally with the football. They don't give the ball to the running backs going wide. They don't give it to the wide receivers going wide. So it's easy for the defense to put them in their scopes. And with Dez Bryant not playing like a superstar, these are some of the problems. Their secondary, they got some young playmakers, I believe, that got a lot better. Their defensive line, they got some young playmakers, I believe, that established themselves. So these are some of the things for Dallas to be able to take that next step. But I don't agree with Charles. I don't think that they're a bunch of losers.
Look, I don't agree with him either, but I do think he's speaking to the narrative, which is been proven out over time. They haven't had back-to-back 10-win seasons, CC, since they won those Super Bowls.
Right.
They can't stand success. There's always something. The Zeke thing, I know it was a couple years old, okay, but it just happened to happen to the Cowboys after they had an outstanding season. You know, you got the Randy Gregory. They still don't have him. How much would that help a young secondary if you had David Irving not suspended the entire season, or Randy Gregory? But look, the hard decisions they have to make, and I know later on in the show we're going to talk about the difference between the Eagles and the Patriots. The thing about the Patriots is they bid adieu to great players and either offer them less money or simply push them elsewhere.
Yes.
And I don't know what the smart solution is for Dez. But I'm the biggest Dez Bryant fan there is. I thought he was a superstar before other people thought he was a superstar. But he's not anymore. So can they create a Dez 2.0? You mentioned Witten. Can they use him? You look at what the Chargers did. They didn't get rid of Antonio Gates.
No.
They went out and got a Hunter Henry. So you have 2 tight ends, so you can hide the fact that he can't run anymore. So they haven't helped some of their aging stars in terms of surrounding them with younger players that can hide their weaknesses. Obviously, not having Zeke just kills you because the entire offense is built around it. The offensive line was not the same last year as it was the previous year. And maybe the other elephant in the room is just how good is Dak Prescott, right? He could not rescue this team. And he got a pass the first year because he was a rookie. He was really a third-string quarterback that was thrust into being the starting quarterback with a star on the side of his helmet.
And they had 13 wins.
Right. And this year they still had 9 wins. I mean, with all these things, with Sean Lee getting hurt again, they still had 9 wins. But I think that Charles Haley does nail it, even though he's being kind of sarcastic, kind of caustic, just to kind of rattle the cage. When are the Cowboys going to live up to the Cowboy image of being one of the elite teams in the NFL? And when you can't put back-to-back big years together, it's hard for us to buy in.
I just want to ask y'all's perspective on this, right? Because y'all are laying out the case for why they look like this. But you notice in the question I said explanations. There's explanations, and then there are excuses, right?
Yes.
So I want to start with you, Cris Carter. Are all of these things, from Dak having, I don't know, a sophomore slump year, for Zeke's 6-game suspension, are those legitimate explanations or are they excuses?
No, they're legitimate explanations. The left tackle, Tyron Smith, one of the best that we've seen play pro football, has been a dominant force. He is not the same player due to a variety of different injuries and, more importantly, lack of practice time. You know, so Dez Bryant, he's not a superstar anymore.
Clearly.
Jason Witten, listen, man, Father Time is undefeated. He comes for us all. But the lack of creativity, you know, I'm not going to make excuses for that. They are not very, very creative. And NFL defenses eventually they will catch up to you. You cannot be a bully and play in the NFL. You got to be able to generate big plays, and you got to get yards after the catch. They are one of the worst in the NFL. Like, when they throw the ball, say, Dak, he doesn't get any help.
Right.
Wherever that ball goes, if they do catch it, they're going to be tackled on the spot.
So their lack of creativity. Obviously, a lot of that's on Garrett, and they've changed some of the coaching staff. But how much of it is on Dak in that they don't feel like he's there yet to be able to be creative, to understand what they want him to do?
That is part of it, because as a young quarterback, you can only unveil so many volumes to the book for them. And you could see last year when they didn't have Zeke and when they needed, Dak is not that guy yet.
Well, the one thing that they do have, the one bonus that they have, is that you cannot renegotiate his contract where he was drafted this year. Next year they can. So right now it fits. I mean, he didn't make like $1 million. So right now they run the benefit of having an elite team with a quarterback who, whatever you think of him, a starting quarterback making pennies, that should allow you to put those star players, the athletes around.
And you better take advantage of that window.
Right.
A lot like Seattle did. Now, Seattle would love to have 2 Super Bowls, you know, to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. They got 2 of them. But their team was built on Russell Wilson's first contract. Once they gave him that next contract, they struggled. Great point.
Welcome back to First Things First. Now we're going to welcome in former NFL head coach here, Eric Mangini. Thanks for joining us, Coach.
Good to be here. Good
Coach.
to see you guys.
Happy coach.
Happy coach. Always happy coach.
Oh, I mean, they taught y'all to be happy in New England.
It is. We had a course on
Happy
it.
101, happy 201.
Yeah.
Where would you first get
I've
there?
got a master's degree in happiness.
All right, I like that.
It's good.
Okay, so Frank Reich. Now, he was introduced yesterday as the Colts' new head coach after spending the last 2 seasons as the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. Now, his challenge will be turning around an offense that averaged only 16 points per game last year. Of course, having Andrew Luck back should help. So here's Reich talking about his franchise QB.
He is magical. He has special, unique traits and abilities that I respect as much as anybody. And I can't wait to work with him. But if we're going to win championships, and that's the plan, it's going to be about surrounding our whole team and the way we're going to bring out the best in each other.
Okay. Now, Coach, how do you like this fit with the Colts and Frank Reich?
I like this fit. I really wanted to see what Andrew Luck would look like in the New England system. I thought that was a great fit. But if that couldn't get done, I like this fit as well. And the reason I like it is this is a system he played in college. So he's been in the West Coast system. He did it with Jim Harbaugh. He's got that familiarity. It allows you to be creative and do things from a formation base and a personnel basis that doesn't cloud you up a lot of the reads. So there's consistency there. And then we saw with Nick Foles, it allows you to get the ball off quickly if that's something that you want to do. And that's something that he has to do to protect himself. There's a couple great plays from the Super Bowl that give you an indication of what this offense could be and what it could be with Frank Reich. In this example coming up here, it's a first down play. New England's in a 3-deep zone, and it's a good run support defense. It cloudies up the middle of the field. But what Philly's going to do is they've got crossing routes underneath. They've got a little hook route that hits over that. It's going to be a post on the outside. But it's spacing and timing. And even though New England's in good position, they can't make the play. And now it's a situation where it's 2nd and 3, and they're ahead of the sticks. So what does New England do on the next play? They go and they try to play man-to-man defense. And you're chasing this system a little bit. You want to get tighter coverage. You want to have nickel defense. They should be fine in run support. The Eagles are going to run a little zone run. It's going to look like their run-pass option plays, but it's not really that. So that's how they can disguise things. And this next play, so on the 2nd and 3, this one goes for 50 yards. And you'll see on the end zone shot here, one of the big problems. As Blunt breaks through and starts to break outside, when you're in man-to-man defense, the DBs have to go where the receivers go. So now it creates leverage problems. And to me, these types of plays building off each other is what makes this system something that I think could be really good in Indianapolis.
Well, it's going to be very difficult for them. Philadelphia, if we're going off of them, last year they rushed the ball for 100 yards combined with their 3 running backs 14 times. They were 13-1 in those games, including the Super Bowl. So we know if Indianapolis, they're going to do that, their offensive line's got to get a lot better, and they got to invest in a group of running backs to be able to duplicate this. To me, what I worry about is how can they be physical? We talk about the Philadelphia influence. Philadelphia, man, they got great big people. They got a 7-man rotation on the defensive front. They got 7 guys that played 400 snaps offensive line. They even lost their best offensive lineman in Jason Peters, the left tackle, and they filled in for him by being a right-handed team after that, running Lane Johnson's side with him being a dominant run blocker. So that's what I want to see. Through free agency and through the draft, I want to see how the characteristics of this team change. I like what he said, Frank, in saying we're going to put a good team around this, because you got to stop the owner from talking, because the owner talked about when he signed Andrew Luck that if we don't win multiple Super Bowls, then it's been a failure. So the message now has to be a little more consistent and stay with Frank as the speaking voice of that franchise compared to the sporadic. Sometimes it's the coach, sometimes it's the player, sometimes it's the owner there in Indianapolis.
It's the best they could do, right? It's not a great situation when you go all in, you hire a defensive staff, you hire a coordinator, and then all of a sudden the guy leaves you at the altar. And it's not like weddings when you can go back to the dating scene, spend a couple of years, figure stuff out. You got to find a head coach. And look, Frank Wright was great with the Chargers. He obviously did a great job with two young quarterbacks, two impressionable quarterbacks in Philadelphia. And you had to have somebody who's a quarterback whisperer. But I think what we're all talking about is they have to have Chris Ballard has to do what Howie Roseman was able to do. They got the personnel in this franchise is just not good enough. And in the NFL, everybody's kind of clumped in the middle, and what separates teams are a couple of star players and a star quarterback, with the exception of the Colts and maybe the Browns, although the Browns had some good young offensive talent. The Colts just not have good enough players, and they didn't have Andrew Luck. We'll see if they get Luck back. They also need to get some talent around.
And they play in a very physical division. People don't watch the AFC South, they don't think. But let me tell you something. Jacksonville, with them young players, they're not going anywhere. Houston, they got Deshaun Watson, and they still have a very physical and a very athletic
They get J.J.
defense.
Watt back.
So what they're going against, they have to get bigger and get physical in a hurry so they can compete in their own division, Coach.
I agree with the owner. I think Andrew Luck has the potential to win multiple championships. I really believe in him as a quarterback. And the Colts situation, it's a great situation for a new head coach. They've got a ton of cap space. The top end of the roster is on one-year deals. If you want to change those guys out, swap them out, you can without dead money. They've got pretty much all their draft picks. With Matt Eberflus coming there, Matt was my linebacker coach in Cleveland. He'll fit in. He'll make it work. He's that type of guy. To me, this is a great job and a great opportunity.
Coach, let me ask you this around priorities. As you say, they have a lot of cap space, which is a good thing because it sounds like they need a lot of acquisitions to kind of build this out the way they needed to. Where would you start in terms of your priority list of what's most important to acquire for them to be successful?
I would start defensively. I would get cornerbacks. To me, you need cornerbacks and then some sort of support up front in terms of pass rushers. And they've tried to address those things overall. And then you got to look at, I think Cris made a great point, the running back situation. I love Frank Gore. I am a huge Frank Gore supporter. But he maybe has a year or two left. So
he still has a year or two left?
Hey, Frank Gore defies time, and he's still productive.
And shattered both his knees. Man, he's got a great story.
Ageist, Doug.
Yeah.
Come on, man. That's a wrap on Frank Gore. I love Frank Gore too, but
is he going to be the LeGarrette Blount? Because they had Ajayi and Clement coming in, so you need a burst. You need a guy who can take it the distance, and you need to change the pace. If they're going to run this Philadelphia offense, which was the West Coast offense, it's like the NBA. It's about spacing, man. You get 4 or 5 guys out into the route, you get spacing, then you get yards after the catch. Those are some of the things that you pointed out.
It's also about youth, though. It's also about youth, though, too. Look, Frank Gore's probably a Hall of Famer, borderline Hall of Famer. I mean, it's more about longevity than it was any one great season. But you got to get young back there. And as we've seen in the draft, you can get young, talented backs in the 3rd and 4th round.
Now, Tom Brady would disagree with you that it's about youth. But if you want to go, he was the MVP of the team.
But positions of athleticism.
Well, he's changing the narrative at quarterback. People can change the narrative at other positions too, I think.
Hey, everybody, Nick Wright here, and thank you so much for listening to the First Things First podcast. But I wanted to tell you about another podcast at Fox Sports that we are so excited about, and that is Alexi Lalas's State of the Union podcast. That's right, U.S. soccer legend Alexi Lalas will be partnering up with Fox soccer guru and researcher extraordinaire David Moss to review the top storylines in soccer across the globe. Each week, Alexi will give his State of the Union on American soccer as it rebuilds for the future. Subscribe and listen for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts right now. Now back to the show.
Now let's go back to the NFL. During the week, Super Bowl week, Von Miller said Kirk Cousins could take the Broncos over the edge. Now Miller, well, he's turning to social media to make sure Cousins knows just how big a fan he is. Cousins posted this picture 4 days ago with the caption, quote, "I was raised on these two cereals." Von Miller commented, "Raised eating both breakfast, lunch, and dinner." That wasn't enough. 2 days ago, Cousins then posted this picture with the caption, "Love a good rainbow." Guess what? Von Miller then tweets out, "You're absolutely right. If Kirk loves rainbows, I love rainbows." Now, y'all, wait, full stop. It seems Von Miller is on a mission here, right? And clearly, if that's what's going on in front of social media, I don't want to see what's going on in the DMs. I'm just saying. So do you think, though, Kirk Cousins could change this Broncos team?
I mean, if we look at the Broncos, and it's basically been since Peyton Manning departed them, they got lucky with Peyton Manning. I mean, they caught lightning in a bottle a couple seasons. With a bad neck, coming off Indy, he couldn't go back there, who had drafted Luck. They end up landing him, got them a Super Bowl ring. But there's no team worse throwing the ball the last 3 years than them, except the Cleveland Browns. I mean, when you talk about the defensive personnel that they have, the type of franchise that they have. Now, Von Miller, they need to get this right. John Elway needs to get this right. We gave John Elway all this credit for putting this staff together, putting this roster together, signing the key people. Now, about that quarterback thing. Now, you got lucky with Manning. But you being a former quarterback, John Elway's got to get this right. Sure. And Kirk Cousins would help them get it right.
Look, would he be better? Absolutely. And it's important to remember that even though Peyton won a Super Bowl and got him to another one, the year he won a Super Bowl, he was bad. He was washed up. 9 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. He did nothing really other than not kill them in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he just steered the car home.
Right. And so I think on some level that whether it was Brock Osweiler or drafting a first-round pick or what they've been doing with Trevor Siemian, or they actually even went after Colin Kaepernick, wanted him to take a pay cut to come over, that they convinced themselves that they could have average to even slightly below average quarterback play like they had with Peyton Manning his last year and still win, and that has been proven false. Now, part of it is we have to remember the defense isn't as good as it was.
No, it did slip this year. Yes.
Like, even when Malik Jackson left, that was off the defensive front.
Yes.
And then now Aqib Talib is going to be gone. And so it's different, that defensive backfield. But here's a guy who averaged 27 touchdowns and below 15 interceptions the past 3 years, thrown for nearly 5,000 yards 2 years ago. I don't think Kirk Cousins is great, but I think he's good enough if that defense can continue to kind of be reformulated a little bit. Yeah, I mean, they're a team. Kansas City's going to go through some dips here, right? Like Alex Smith is more steady, doesn't have maybe the potential of Pat Mahomes.
Right.
But a first-year starter in Pat Mahomes, they're going to go through a dip. The Chargers, I think, have a lot of offensive talent, 2 great defenders, but they're still the Chargers. The Raiders have to kind of remake themselves. Von Miller's recruiting the one guy available on the market. They've missed 3 times on a quarterback already. They're going to have to overpay to get him, and I think this is a marriage that everyone knows is going to happen, and all Von Miller's willing to do is extend himself out there and really try and recruit to make it happen.
Also, Demaryius Thomas, he's fallen off the map as far as NFL great receivers. Emmanuel Sanders, I believe that if they decide, Emmanuel Sanders will be the one that they keep. They're paying them both a lot of money. If you go out and get a quarterback that's going to take a massive deal to be able to land him, then you're going to have to compromise some other parts of your football team. They spent a lot of resources on the defense. They have to help out and spend some money on the offense. I believe Kirk Cousins is the beginning of the answer to Denver getting back in the national spotlight.
Let me see if I hear you both correctly. Kirk Cousins betters their situation, but it doesn't sound like either of you believe that acquiring Kirk Cousins is going to make Denver lethal.
Well, I think that there's a couple places Kirk could go. A lot of people are just saying Denver, but just imagine if Kirk Cousins goes to Minnesota. Now, Minnesota has a better roster, top to bottom, and probably have a little more cap flexibility. Now, what are they going to do with Teddy Bridgewater? But Denver is a good football team. He said their defense has slipped a little bit. They lose to lead. How good is that defense? A top 5 defense? Because you can't be mediocre at quarterback and the defense slip down to the middle of the pack and be an elite team.
Well, you asked what options do they have, right? Because remember, if you're not going to go get Kirk Cousins, who's next on the list? You're talking about Case Keenum. Right, and does Case Keenum
Sam Bradford.
Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford can't stay healthy in Minnesota after having one great game.
Yeah, he had a bone bruise, and they almost had to amputate his leg.
I mean, now look, and now for Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins has the decision to make. Do I go to Minnesota, but can I get top dollar in Minnesota? He probably gets offered top dollar in Arizona, but you're not going to win in Arizona, right? They're in rebuild mode. This is probably, Denver likely has to overpay because they've screwed up the quarterback situation so royally the past couple of years. It's a lot like Cleveland in the draft. I don't think Cleveland wants to take a quarterback number 1 overall, but because they've missed on the Carson Wentz's of the world,
they've missed
out. Right? Yeah. They've missed on so many quarterbacks that they're going to take somebody 1 just out of spite. I think Denver's going to overpay just out of spite for themselves, for their own errors in judgment.
I think it's very important because Denver, they have a defensive-minded coach, that they get a veteran quarterback to help out that offensive side, to balance out that team and that organization.
Let me ask this question. Okay, you brought up Elway and the intense pressure that he's under to get this thing right. Is Kirk Cousins getting it right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
If you want to stabilize your passing game, if you want to throw the ball between 3,800 and 4,200 yards, Kirk Cousins is the guy. Now, we get stuck on
Aaron Rodgers.
We get stuck on this franchise guy. Is he a franchise guy? Well, there's only 6 or 8 of those guys. Outside of that, who is a guy that can get you to the Super Bowl? We just saw Nick Foles win a Super Bowl. So we know teams are capable of doing, and I believe that Kirk Cousins is a lot better than Nick Foles.
So let me ask it from a business-centered question, though, Doug. Okay, so we know if he gets Kirk Cousins, we're assuming that that's going to make them significantly better. But what if he doesn't? Is that on Elway? Or are we still saying that the acquiring of the best available veteran quarterback on the market is still a win for Elway?
Look, I don't think there's really any choice here, though. He's kind of got to go all in. Remember, they didn't keep Brock Osweiler. They wanted to keep Brock Osweiler, but they got outbid by $1 million, and Brock Osweiler is still mad because they reinserted Peyton Manning into the starting lineup. He held that grudge against them, right? They go out and draft a quarterback in the first round. He's not good enough. They use Trevor Siemian. He's not good enough. So because they made these errors in judgment, they got their backs against the wall. There really is no other option, and they're going to be bidding against the Jets who need a quarterback, the Browns need a quarterback, the Cardinals that need a quarterback, the Vikings that have 3 quarterbacks, and they really aren't in love with any of them.
And they still need a quarterback.
Right? And so they're going to have to go all in because, that's what's been missing. There have been other pieces that are missing for Denver, but you have no shot, and there's just such a supreme drop-off. Is he an elite? He's not Aaron Rodgers. No. He ain't Tom Brady. He ain't Drew Brees.
But if you don't get him.
He's the best they can do.
Right.
He's the best they can do.
And to help to even further his point, not only did Nick Foles win a Super Bowl, but last year the Atlanta Falcons should have won a Super Bowl, and I think Matt Ryan's really good, but nobody considers him a top 5 quarterback in the game. You can win with really good and really solid. You have to have the pieces around him, and everybody thinks Denver has close to pieces around him, but they've just been inept at that quarterback position.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.